Episode 2, Painted in Blood. The boathouse had a heartbeat. Jonah could feel it in the floorboards, the soft thud that matched his own pulse. Outside, the sea murmured against the cliffs, but inside the air was still, heavy, as if the room were holding its breath. Callum had gone to get fresh water for his paints, leaving Jonah alone in the studio, surrounded by the half-finished echoes of nightmares on canvas. His eyes drifted to the painting, the one Callum had been working on before he left. It was the same road, the same crash, but now the scene had changed. A figure stood at the edge of the frame, dark and indistinct, just a smudge of shadow against the twisted metal and shattered glass. Jonah's skin prickled. He knew that shape, that posture. It was him. He stepped closer, his boots whispering against the worn wooden floor. His hand moved as if on its own, fingers brushing against the rough edge of the canvas. The paint was still wet, the crimson streaks smeared beneath his touch, and suddenly the world lurched. A sound, soft and deep, like a sigh from the bones of the house. The air thickened, colors draining from the room until everything was sepia and soft, like an old photograph. The corners of the studio blurred, walls rippling like the surface of a lake, and Jonah felt himself pulled under. When the world settled, he was not standing in the boathouse anymore. The room around him was brighter, a small apartment with exposed brick walls and a low wooden beam ceiling. The smell of candle wax and something sweet, apples maybe, curled around him. The light was warm, golden, pooling on a table cluttered with paintbrushes and sketches, the same art supplies, but softer, without the dark edge of Callum's current work. Laughter, low and intimate, pulled his attention. At the table sat Callum, his hair shorter, his face softer, less burdened by shadows. He was sketching, the charcoal moving with quick light strokes, his lips curled into a private smile. He looked up, and Jonah's breath caught, but Callum wasn't looking at him. There was someone else in the room. A man stood by the window, his silhouette bathed in the pale blue of the twilight outside. His features were blurred like a dream slipping away on waking, but Jonah felt him, his presence, the warmth of his gaze, the gentle weight of his hand resting on Callum's shoulder. "It's beautiful," the man said, his voice a melody woven with affection. "You always make me look like someone worth capturing." Callum chuckled, a sound Jonah had never heard from him, light and real. "That's because you are." The man leaned in, and their lips met, a brush of skin against skin. Jonah's own lips tingled, as if he were the one being kissed. His heart thudded painfully, a rush of emotions not his own. Love, raw and full, edged with a bitter sweetness that hinted at an end they both felt, coming but did not dare name. The vision thickened, the room wavering. Jonah tried to move, but his feet felt rooted, his body more an echo than a solid thing. He could only watch as the memory unfolded, as Callum and the man exchanged soft words and softer touches, their bodies leaning into each other with the ease of old lovers. "Promise me," the man whispered, his hand cupping Callum's cheek. "Promise me you won't let this go." Callum's smile faltered, a crack in the light. "I promise." And then a crash. The window shattered inward, glass exploding like frozen rain. Darkness bled into the room, thick and alive, curling around the edges of the light. Callum's hand reached out, grasping for the man, but the shadows swallowed him, pulling him into the void. Jonah felt it, the loss sharp and deep, a blade twisting in the soul. The room trembled, the shadows crawling up the walls, and Callum's scream tore through the air, a raw, ragged sound that echoed into nothingness. The world snapped back. Jonah staggered, his hands still pressed against the canvas. The room was cold, the light dim, and he was alone. His lungs burned, and he sucked in a breath, the taste of salt and ashes on his tongue. His fingers were smeared with red, not blood, but paint, sticky and real. He pulled his hand back, the image on the canvas blurred by his touch. The figure, the shadow at the edge of the crash, was gone. Only the road remained, empty and wet, stretching into a horizon smeared with gray. Behind him the door opened, and Callum's presence filled the room. Jonah didn't turn. He couldn't. His mind was still tangled in the memory, his skin still buzzing with the ghost of a kiss. "You okay?" Callum's voice was soft, but there was a tremor beneath it, a string pulled too tight. Jonah swallowed. Who was he? Silence. He felt it, the weight of it settling over them like a shroud. Callum moved closer, his footsteps careful, as if the floor might break beneath him. "I don't remember, but you do." Jonah turned, the air between them charged, humming. "I saw it. I saw you. With him." Callum's face paled, the light pulling sharp shadows from his features, his hands clenched around the empty water jug, his knuckles white. "How?" Jonah raised his hand, still stained with red. "I touched the painting. It wasn't a vision. It was a memory." Callum's breath hitched. "I don't paint memories." "Then what was it?" "A beat." Callum's eyes darkened, a storm brewing behind green and gold. "A promise," he said finally, "one I couldn't keep." Jonah felt it again, that pull, the thread between them drawn taut. His gift flared, and he saw flashes, other lives, other loves, each one slipping through Callum's fingers like water, and always, always, the shadows followed. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "We need to find out why." Callum's lips parted, a protest or a plea, but nothing came. The air thickened, and for a moment the room seemed to tilt, the edges of reality softening. Jonah reached out, his hand finding Callum's, their fingers brushing. The warmth was real, grounding, and the shadows retreated just a little. In the quiet, only their breathing filled the space between them, and beneath it, the boathouse held its breath, waiting,